Hey, this is Devin Boker, and you are listening to The Wildlife, the podcast where we explore the wonders of the natural world and the science that helps us understand it. The world is full of science, and in turn, scientists, and not enough people that truly have a talent, a spark, for communicating all of that discovery and wonder to the rest of the world.
Right. Carly York. I am a associate professor at Lenoir-Rhyne University, an animal physiologist, and a science communicator.
Today, science communication, children's books, squid physiology, mind-blowing animal facts, things that are true that are hard to believe, academic and environmental activism, holding on to hope in a world that seems insistent that we shouldn't, and advice for future scientists. Stay tuned. Part of the reason that I want to talk today is just in terms of, it's kind of like general, just in terms of your science communication efforts.
Sure.
You pop up on my FYP a lot on TikTok, that's for sure. And you've always got really interesting factoids and tidbits and things on there. I see you active on Twitter, a couple of other different places. I mean, just tell me a little bit about like your current science communication efforts, your style, your approach.
Honestly, I kind of fell into the world of science communication. I didn't really purposefully go in this way, but the path keeps leading me this way. I only got on Twitter about 3 years ago, maybe 2 years, 3 years. And that was because a friend convinced me to, and I did it very begrudgingly and social media, gross. That was in January of 2020 that I did that right before lockdown. So I was really, really thankful to have that online community, and I was able to start getting involved with the SciComm folks, with Sarah McAnulty and Skype Scientist. So that was my introduction into it. And I just learned as I went, and I certainly don't think that I know everything there is to know. I'm waiting to take my Twitter misstep. I feel like I've been there long enough that I probably have a misstep headed my way. But I just try to keep things lighthearted and positive, and fun. Those are the things I keep mostly at the heart for the SciComm stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's a good way of doing things. I mean, if you're not heavily involved in the actual field of science and stuff, a lot of the stuff that like kind of comes out to the mainstream oftentimes is like really dark and doom and gloom.
It is.
And it's all true things. It's all very important things. It's things that we should talk about, we should address. But sometimes that, can turn people away. Because it's like a little overwhelming and stuff. And so I appreciate when there are people who make an effort to be that, that positive person, and to help, nourish curiosity in people. That's the kind of thing that we need more of. And so I really appreciate seeing that.
Thank you. I sometimes, ask myself if I'm doing something worthwhile, because I don't tend to talk about the big things like climate change. And that's a choice that I've made. But my goal is to just be a face of science that people can get to know and trust and enjoy, and have that be just, opening the door just a little bit. Opening their hearts to science.
There's something to be said about that. What I usually see happen is like, with a lot of the big stuff like climate, everyone wants to know like what they can do. Well, maybe not everyone. Some people want to know like, what can I do then? What can I do about it? And sometimes the answers aren't exactly clear cut, and maybe they're not the most achievable for people. And so it can be disheartening, and then people are just like, well, okay, well, why try? Why get involved? And so like there are still places for people to do that. Not everyone has to talk about the doom and gloom,
Yeah, I think the internet has that covered.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a topic that I've mulled about even with this show, but about some of the heavier topics and things, and saying, gosh, am I doing a service or a disservice if I don't talk about those
Right.
things? And is that ignoring reality? And I no, I think yeah, I think people are aware. People know.
They are. People are aware, people know, and truly like just trying to heal that bit of mistrust between the general public and science. It's a big thing to do, and just gloom and doom won't do that.
Yeah,
If everybody's saying the same thing about climate change, it won't do that. There has to be there has to be a friendly face before they can even accept these much bigger ideas.
yeah, yeah. So in terms of like different science communication efforts and things, so like I mentioned, I've seen you on Twitter a lot, TikTok, got a lot of great content on there. But you don't only do social media; you do a whole variety of other things. And like I saw, you have a children's book.
Yeah. Um, I honestly, social media has opened up so many opportunities for me, and I feel like I'm just trying them all on. Like when an opportunity comes my way, I'm like, sure, I will do that. And I figure eventually I'll settle into my favorite mode of SciComm. But the children's book was through Twitter. They actually found me through Twitter and asked me to write that. And then I have just finished up another children's book that should be out in 2024. It's on like all the badass females in the animal kingdom.
That's
It's
cool.
pretty fun. Um, and and then I'm working on another book right now, an adult book. I just signed with a publisher, so I'm all over the place, but it's fun to try everything.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really awesome. I've contemplated here and there like trying to work on a book, and then every time I kind of get started, it just gets so overwhelming and daunting, and I'm like, oh my
Yes.
gosh, maybe maybe not. I don't know if I'm cut out for that. It's
Yeah, I it's tough, and every morning I have been rolling out of bed at 5:30 and just starting to work and working as long as I can, and some days I really have to remind myself it's just stitch by stitch,
yeah,
stitch by
yeah.
stitch. Those 3 sentences you wrote today will
It'll all
they'll
come
be there tomorrow.
together. Yep.
Yeah.
So this is kind of where you are now. Educational experience and things. What was your journey there? What kind of got you to animal physiology and things?
I grew up riding horses competitively, and when I was in college, I was also training really hard and competing. And I majored in exercise physiology. And the reason that I did that was because I wanted to apply it to horses. Like I wanted to do sports medicine for horses. And it was maybe like my junior year where I realized I should have been a biology major. Um, and at the time, I think biology, you have to declare it right away. You got to start your majors classes right away. And it was just too late to go into that. So I graduated and I took a year off where I worked at the North Carolina Zoo in their wildlife rehab program and took a few classes that I was missing for requirements for graduate school. And then I got into Western Kentucky University in Bowling Green, where I actually stuck with the horse theme. I studied equine social behavior and stress physiology.
Hmm.
So I was sitting out in a field with horses all day long, and anytime they poop, I ran up with a baggie and bagged some poop and brought it back to my freezer. Um, so that's all kind of linear, I guess. While I was there, I took a marine biology class, and I didn't even want to. I don't like water and the beach, and I'm just not into. I'm not a beach person. So I was taking this marine biology class, and one of the things that the graduate students had to do was give a lecture on a topic of choice, and I chose cephalopods, which is the group that includes squid, octopus, cuttlefish, and nautilus. And I honestly don't even know why I chose that. I'm sure I was just like, these seem cool. Let's just do this. And I totally fell in love with them. So I finished up my master's, and then I went to Old Dominion University for my PhD in Norfolk, Virginia, where I studied squid physiology. Total, totally different than horse physiology.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, but I was studying how they respond to predators, what different sensory features they use to respond to predators. Um, so did that and graduated, and now I am a professor at Lenoir-Rhyne University in Hickory, North Carolina.
No, that's fascinating. I mean, it's a cool route of experience. I appreciate you mentioning the horse poop collection
Yeah,
because
yeah.
a lot of people when they're thinking about like pursuing a career or something like that and something biology oriented, they think lab and lab coat and or maybe they're like out like with a machete like chopping through the rainforest or something, and you don't realize just how much of it centers around poop. Um,
So much.
way more often than you think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so much poop.
Um, and the cephalopod physiology. That's always been something that has really fascinated me, and I've yet not ever had a huge understanding of. It's just such like a mystery.
There
They're
is.
so different,
Yeah.
and yeah, and have always had a lot of questions. And what's kind of funny is I was I did not even realize until I was looking through your site that 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 TED Ed video was like yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. I've shown that because I teach high school. Like
Oh,
during
really?
most of the year, I teach high school biology, and I've shown that video before, like in my wildlife
Awesome.
biology class when we're talking about like relations with other animals and like adaptations for survival and stuff. And then so I'm looking and I'm like, wait a second, okay, that's kind of cool.
That was actually probably my first step into SciComm before I even knew what SciComm was and what I was doing.
Hmm.
I love those TED Ed videos. They're phenomenal in
Yeah.
the classroom. And I was looking for one on squid to show my class, and it didn't exist. So I thought maybe I should take a swing at that. So I sent TED Ed a proposal, and they were into it. So we worked and got that out. I have another one that will be out sometime. Um, I this one has been we've been working on it for a long time. It's been a lot of COVID stops and
Yeah.
starts.
Yeah.
And this next one is on frogs being used as pregnancy tests.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I'm curious. That's interesting.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. It's a really cool experience. I pretty many of my friends have now done it too
Hmm.
because I'm like, this was fun, do it.
Yeah.
Um, so it's a great experience to be able to have to boil down your science into 5 minutes that's understandable to
Hmm.
everybody.
Yeah, and what I often appreciate about a lot of those is they start with rather than like jumping straight in with the facts and things, it starts with like a context, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's
And give it a
always
story.
yeah, it's like sometimes when you're talking about communication or science communication, people are always like, get the main point out there right away to try to hook people. And I don't know, sometimes if it's less about just getting the fact across and you're actually trying to
Mhm.
engage the curiosity of somebody, like that context
Mhm.
is a really good hook. Yeah.
Yeah, there's data to support the fact that storytelling is a way better way to get people to absorb information
Hmm.
than just telling them facts.
Yeah.
Our brains have evolved to absorb stories.
Can could we not to like necessarily like rehash the video or anything. I'm absolutely going to link it in the episode notes or anything, but
Sure.
it's fascinating, the whole topic of squid physiology and outsmarting their predators and things. Yeah, could you just spend a moment like talking about that?
Yeah, that was my dissertation,
Hmm.
which was ended up being 5 publications, boiled down into that video. So I studied how they respond to predators. And I was looking at lateral line system. Like in the video, it talks about the little hair cells.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that hadn't been looked at very much at all. I think I was one of the first people to look at it in a behavioral context. And then I was looking at their camouflage when a predator was coming, and then the hydrodynamics of an escape jet. So it was taking all of those ideas and being like, oh, you're just a little squid swimming in the ocean, encountering, the whale and the other things, and doing the behaviors that I actually documented in real life.
If you were to pick a top 5 favorite physiological facts about animals, what might those be?
Yeah. I got him. I got him for you. All right. Panda bears poop 40 times a day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Their digestive tracts. So panda bears are herbivores, even though most bears are carnivores or omnivores. So their digestive tract isn't really designed to absorb all the nutrients and break down the cellulose in that bamboo. So they're just pooping all day long. Vultures puke when they get scared. I like that one. When I worked in the wildlife facility, we had a raincoat for when the vultures came in. And it was the new person who got to put on the raincoat and stand at the head of the vulture. Dung beetles can carry 250 times their weight in poop. Just impressive.
That's incredibly impressive, yeah.
Some insects have ears on their knees. And Sicilians, which are like snake amphibians. They are amphibians, but they're shaped like snakes. When they are born, which is often through live birth, they will eat their mother's skin for nutrients.
Oh. Does she regrow the skin?
Yeah.
Or is that
Yeah.
okay. I was like,
She
is that a
grows the skin and
finality?
then kind of sheds it, and they
Oh.
nibble it off of her.
Well, I mean, to each their own, I guess. Oof. There's reasons you don't equate a lot of animal behaviors to human context, I guess. Oh, jeez. No, that's interesting. I didn't know that. And I'm assuming it's almost like I was just blanking on the other example I was thinking of, but it's like that, like an initial nutritional setup.
Yep.
I wonder, is there like a microbiome transfer from
I
that?
wouldn't be surprised if there was.
Maybe kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Bug knees having ears is a new one. I have not heard of that in the slightest. So that's
They don't all, some do, some have
yeah.
them. They are all over the place on insects. And that's, they don't have ears like we do with a
Yeah.
complicated inner ear. It's more of a tympanum that is a membrane that vibrates.
Oh,
So you'll
yeah.
see that membrane in different places, including on their knees.
That that makes a lot more sense then. Yeah. Not quite like a lobe or anything
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Okay. This might be under the moderately the same umbrella here, but what would be like the strangest animal fact that you can think of?
I love the fact that barnacles have the largest penis size proportionate to their body. Like that's just a classic good one.
And it's what is that ratio again? I can't.
I don't remember what the ratio is. They do their penises fall off every year and they regrow them, and they grow them differently depending on the water currents at the time. So
Hmm.
if it's in relatively still water, they'll grow really long, relatively thin penises, and if there's a lot more movement going on, they are thicker and stubbier.
Oh, I mean that makes more sense. What is like evolutionarily? What is the reason for that?
I mean, barnacles don't move very much.
Yeah.
So, in order to get, if you're gonna do any, I mean, yeah, it's either put the sperm next to the females, which is what they choose to do, or you just spew it into the air or the water
Hmm.
and hope
Yeah.
they land in the right place, which is a strategy that a lot of animals do use.
Sponges. I think sponges do
Yeah,
that, right?
sponges do, corals do.
Yeah, that's always interesting. High school students cannot handle that when I try to teach about that. They
Yeah.
just they don't quite have the maturity for the conversation. They're just like, oh my god. Gosh, what are you teaching me? What is something an animal fact? And I think that you did this in a video recently. Actually, what is an animal fact that you know is true, but you still can't believe?
Yeah, that sharks have been around longer than trees, evolutionarily. That just blows my mind. Every time I've tweeted it, I've TikToked it, and every time I have a moment after I hit send where I'm like, that can't be right. And double check myself again. It is. Okay, believe it.
that that is it. It is kind of mind blowing to think about. What I guess I don't know what the numbers are in terms of like when each evolved. There's so many numbers in
I
biology. Oh my
used to, and I don't. And I'm not going to guess.
gosh. I can always look it up. Yeah, no, that's a really interesting one. It reminds me of the it's something like the T Rex lived closer to the invention of the iPhone than it did the Stegosaurus.
That is really wild.
And yet, in pop culture and stuff, we associate them as being coexistent, and that
Right,
perhaps the Stegosaurus and T Rex used to fight each other, and it's
right,
great to
right.
imagine and things. But wow, the distance there is just remarkable.
That is
Yeah.
amazing.
So yeah, and looking through your site and stuff, of course, SciComm isn't the only thing you do, and you do a lot in academia as well, but you also do a lot of activism work.
I
Um,
have in
yeah,
the past. I will say
yeah,
this past year um, was a toughie.
yeah.
Um, and getting back from COVID has been
Mm-hmm.
tough. But I run a student group on campus that's called Seeds, and it's part of the Ecological Society of America. Stands for Sustainable Education in Ecology and Diversity. I forget the last S. It's
Society. I don't know.
it's it's all about promoting diversity
Mm-hmm.
in science.
Yeah.
And it's a very cool organization. I've had lots of students actually take their first airplane ride
Mm.
to a field station, either in Arizona or up north, and do like a week long field trip that's completely supported by the institution. And then we also do stuff on campus, or we have in the
Mm-hmm.
past done a lot of stuff on campus.
Yeah.
Things just along the lines of recycling, um, which is an ongoing issue on campuses. We had one bigger event. It was the fall of 2020 before the election. And the New York Times came out with an article that was the 100 environmental rollbacks that were made under the Trump administration. So we made 100 signs, one sign for every rollback, and in the middle of the night. We did this in the evening. A lot of students were involved. And then a group of students in the middle of the night went and put them all out on the quad. So the next day, when people walked on campus, there was 100 signs. And we have a sleepy little campus. That's not something that usually happens. So there was a lot of conversation about
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I was like, how much trouble am I going to get into? But it's good trouble.
Right.
These
Yeah. Some
students
things are
have
worth it.
yeah,
Right.
I want them to stand up for what they believe and teach them to be a little bit brave, even if it means you're going to get in
Yeah.
trouble.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Thinking about like, I know we were at the beginning we were talking about how like typically try to stay away from talking about some like the bigger, darker, more troubling. There's all kinds of statistics out there. We were just talking about sharks. Um, and I've been doing a lot of. I just did an interview in relation to shark declines around the world and stuff, and
Mm,
just the numbers. Talking about something that's been around longer than trees,
yeah.
and you talk about the statistics when it comes to their decline. It's concerning to
Yes.
say the least.
Yes.
Um, what for non-scientists and things, sometimes I think it's nice to hear from people who are in science and who do that work, um, to kind of think, what is their outlook on the
Yeah.
future and on conservation and the climate.
It's rough. I mean, especially right now in North Carolina, the past few days have been incredibly hot, and Our air quality has been awful. It's been filled with smoke. Um, so days like that make it feel like the outcome's not so great. But, you know, staying hopeful, um, there's no reason to do anything but stay hopeful and keep trying. So I have a little farm that I
Mhm.
run, where we try to grow as much food as we can. It's a little animal sanctuary. Um, we don't eat meat, which agriculture is a huge contributor to climate change. That's like the easiest thing that you can do if you want to do something is reduce your meat intake. Um, and I have a platform at the university where I can talk about this with my students in a serious way, and offer suggestions. So I have that outlet in
Mhm.
addition to my silly TikToks. I I wish I could. I wish I could say everything's going to be fine. Don't know. I don't know. I'm gonna just stick to my silly TikToks.
Yeah. No, I get it. It's it's hard. It's really hard. I like I said, I teach high school students, and there's, I think I mean, with college students and things, there's a rhetoric about today's young people that does not match my reality and experience with today's young people.
Yeah.
They're very passionate,
Mhm.
and they're very fired up about climate and the environment and the future, and something that's interesting is, whereas in other contexts of communicating science and talking about the climate and stuff, people can be really dismissive. Some people can be like, well, what's the point anyway?
Mhm.
Like a lot of the young people I work with, they are very much like, well, what is something actionable that I can do? What can I
Yes.
go home and do right now? What can
Right.
I go argue with my uncle about?
Yeah.
you know
Right.
and it's that, to me, is like, I think if I wasn't teaching, I would have a lot harder of a time,
Mhm.
coping
Mhm. Mhm.
with the state of things. I think seeing the younger generation being as motivated as they are is, it's I think the thing that gets me through some of
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
because there really is kind of a, I mean, conservation is such an issue of like putting out little fires sometimes, and then turning around and seeing a big wildfire and going, well, at least I got these couple little ones.
Right. Right.
um, but yeah, just knowing that there's genuine care and interest in that, I think is good. But yeah, yeah, I don't know. I get fired up sometimes. I mean, I just put up a TikTok yesterday, which was not my typical. Normally, I'm just kind of like positive, whatever, and random animal things. And I
Mhm.
put one up. I don't know. I was like looking at a straw
Mhm.
in my kitchen, like a plastic straw, and I was like, what's so silly about this? Is like, yeah, we should not be using plastic straws, but it's less than 1% of
Oh,
ocean
I
plastic, and where
know.
does the rest of it come from? And so I kind of like went off, but yeah,
That is virtue signaling, the whole straw thing, and it
yeah,
doesn't. That is such a small amount of the pollution.
yeah,
Like if you are eating a fish dinner and sipping out of your paper straw, you've completely missed the point because the
yeah,
fishing industry is awful in terms of pollution and bycatch and conservation issues.
yeah.
There's some that are better that are certified,
Hmm.
but for the most part, it's not good. It's not good.
It's one of those things where people feel empowered, and so that's a good thing, but it's
Mhm.
also it's kind of one of those falsehoods that gets put in it puts the onus on the consumer,
Yeah.
and on the everyday person. It says it's your fault, and then if you just switch to do this, then then it'll change. And it's like,
Yeah.
well,
Mhm.
that's always hard. It's a hard conversation, I know, and not to like bring the tone down
No,
incredibly
it
or
is.
anything like that, but it's difficult.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, Kind of on that note, and to bounce back from that a little bit, I mean, the listenership of the wildlife primarily between 18 and 24, so we're talking, post high school,
Mhm.
college student age, things like that, and then yeah, a lot of university students and things as well. If you were to think, back on your experiences or things that, lessons that you learned that you wish you had known before even, um, what advice would you have for young people who are looking to get into science or wanting to be a change maker in science or conservation?
I think always staying curious is incredibly important, and accepting that failure is part of the process.
Hmm.
Science is hard, and but the beautiful thing about it is, say you run an experiment and you don't get the results that you expected, those are still results. That's
Yeah.
still information,
Hmm.
to help you move forward on the next step. But you have to be able to kind of pick yourself up and go again and go again and go again, and know that this is part of the process. And it eventually stops hurting so much, when you get used to it and realize that it is just part of the process here.
I can't tell you how often I see, when you're teaching like scientific method and things even, and I see eraser marks on the hypothesis,
Yeah,
and I'm like, what's that about? And they're like, well, it was wrong. I'm like, well, that's okay.
right.
It doesn't need to be right. That's kind of the point, actually. Like, it's you're perfectly fine.
Yeah,
But there's
like that's
such
the
this thing in our
beauty.
society that like it's got to be perfect the first time.
Mhm.
Ah, jeez, it's those eraser
Science
marks. They drive me
science does
crazy.
not work that way. It's lots of imperfections coming together for
Yeah,
something.
yeah. Um, well, is there anything that you can think of that like we didn't discuss that you think listeners might be like whether it's a factoid or something that we just kind of didn't go deep enough on that you think you'd like to mention?
I would just encourage any budding scientists to really pay attention to how they communicate their science to the general public, and know
Hmm.
that that can make a really big difference. Um, for a long time, scientists were tucked away in their labs and not talking to the public while bad things were happening. And we're recovering from that now. So anything you can do to just be a friendly face of science, do it.
No, I will say social media, for all the bad pieces,
Mm-hmm.
right, has been phenomenal for education and for like science communication and things,
Yeah,
and
it has.
making that more democratic. It's really cool.
It's completely changed my trajectory and
Yeah.
the connections that you can make. I tell all of my senior students, I'm like, get on Twitter, and they roll their eyes at me, and then they do, and suddenly they have labs that they want to join for graduate school. They're
Right. The
seeing that.
connections.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just they're endless. It's amazing. The communities are very welcoming.
Thanks again to Dr.
Okay.
Carly
Well.
Ann York for joining us on The
Yeah.
Wildlife today. If you'd like to stay up to date with all of the wonderful work that Carly is doing, please be sure to check out today's episode notes to see her website and follow her on social media. If you would like to support science communication, you can do that by supporting The Wildlife for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/thewildlife. If you have any questions, guest recommendations, or would like to be featured on the show, you can reach me at hello@thewildlife.blog or on TikTok, Instagram at Devin the Nature Guy. Thank you all so much for listening today. Without you, there is no show. So wherever you are, I hope you find a moment of wonder and that you get outside, stay curious, be yourself, and peace out, rainbow trouts.